He is host of the YouTube channel Professor Dave Explains, which currently enjoys a subscriber count, I think, of like 2.5 million people. He's got over 1,000 videos posted which teach chemistry, physics, biology, and economics and other stuff. He is author of a book, came out a couple of years ago, called Is This Wi-Fi Organic? A Guide to Spotting Misleading Science Online. Dave Farina, thanks for coming, brother.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the reasons we're talking today is that I've been watching some fireworks on Twitter between you and, are they ID apologists, intelligent designers, or flat out creationists, or who are these people?
So I assume you're talking about the Discovery Institute.
Yep, I'm talking about the Discovery Institute.
So to be clear, creationism and intelligent design are synonymous. ID is rebranded creationism to try to sneak it into public school science curricula. They're synonymous. But these guys, it's propaganda mill out of Seattle, whose purpose ultimately is to erode the separation of church and state through various means. Right now, it's mainly been this whole get intelligent design into public science class. Their wealthy backers have ulterior motives.
Don't they go cull religious PhD types? I'm thinking, of course, of Dr. Stephen Meyer, who wrote the book Signature in the Cell, which I think has really been sort of cast off by mainstream scientists in that field. Is that correct? I mean, have you seen Signature in the Cell and the other work by Meyer?
Yes. So I have been going down the line of the Discovery Institute roster and putting out debunk video after debunk video, discrediting all of their primary contributors. Number 2 in the series is Stephen Meyer. So I talk quite a lot about that book and his other works. All of it is science denial. All of it is pseudoscience. And all of it is squarely discredited by every respected member of the field, which he's not a part of. He is a doctorate in philosophy of science. But at any rate, all of these people in the Discovery Institute, they get the doctorates simply to posture as informed people when they're really just apologists. Most of them have never published any actual scientific literature, or if they've done a couple, they've since moved on and now just write books full of lies.
This is what makes Meyer yet another apologist hack, just like the rest of them. To a layperson, does he sound like he knows what he's talking about? Yes. Does he sound like a reasonable, grounded person? Yes. Does he sound sincere in his convictions? Yes. Is he actually any of those things? Not even a little bit. It's a facade, a costume he wears for those who only need a friendly tone and a message they want to hear, but have no desire to actually learn a thing about science. He is fully aware of all the research he contradicts in his content. His career is centered around it. One could therefore say that Meyer is slightly more sophisticated than some apologists, in that while some of his lies are blatantly obvious to anyone who got a B or better in 9th grade biology, some of them do require an investigation of the primary scientific literature, an investigation he knows that not a single member of his target audience will produce. But that's why I bring the investigation to you, so that we can all conclude together, religious or otherwise, that like everyone else affiliated with the DI, Meyer is a complete fraud.
Well, Dave, is this people using a degree outside of their field? Did they get it from a religious institution, or was it from a degree mill, or all the above? I know it's a broad question.
Yeah. So the DI, they try to posture as very credible. So I don't think any of them have fake diplomas from degree mills like Kent Hovind or something like that. They have real degrees. So Stephen Meyer has a real doctorate in philosophy of science from Cambridge or something. I forget where he got that. Yeah, so it's a real degree. It's not like he doesn't have a doctorate. But he certainly does not understand biology. I mean, if you watch my debunk of him in particular, most of it is about the Cambrian Explosion because that's what he talks about in that book. But there's also a lot of stuff that he says about very basic biology, very basic genetics, which demonstrates that he doesn't even understand this topic at like a high school level. Like I'm really not exaggerating. Either that or he's just genuinely, just lying through his teeth about it. So I did Casey Luskin, Stephen Meyer, Meyer, Michael Behe, Gunter Beckley. I'm squaring up for some more. There's some other figures that definitely need to be taken down a notch, but it's just fraudulent top to bottom. It's a propaganda mill. There's no scientific validity to any of it, and that's just how it is.
Well, let's talk about the Cambrian Explosion. This was pitched when I was sort of being introduced to it. And I don't know if I was young Earth. I was a creationist, right? Adam, Eve, garden snake, that kind of thing. And I was in that for a long time. Too long, I'm embarrassed to admit. But even when I came out, one of the pitches was that, this was an accelerated evolution that happened just like that. And then I began to research Cambrian, and it didn't happen just like that. Do you want to get into it for me?
Sure. I mean, they like to exploit the colorful language and make it seem as though, you'll see images where it's literally like a bang graphic, and then all of these organisms tumbling out as though.
Well, if you would, I'm going to stop you. Can you explain what it is quickly? So
it's just a paleontological event, right? We're talking about something in the history of life on Earth where new phyla emerged very rapidly. So new types of living organisms emerged relatively rapidly. And by relatively rapidly, we're talking about a time span of about 80 million years. So we're definitely not talking about any kind of a snap of the fingers. But they try to downplay the breadth of the event. They flat out lie about the paleontological evidence leading up to the event. So they say that all of these animal forms emerged sort of instantly in this event, whereas in fact, in the Ediacaran strata, the period immediately before the Cambrian, there's a lot of lead up to it. I mean, it's going to get pretty esoteric pretty fast, but in that debunk, I sort of show how the very, very nitty gritty details that Meyer tries to present about the event are just flat out fabricated. They're just false.
Moving on chronologically from the Cambrian explosion, Meyer lies about every other era he attempts to discuss.
But the Cambrian explosion isn't the only such event in the history of life. There are many. A little bit later in the fossil record, there's an event called the Great Ordovician Biodiversity Event, or GOBI, where there's a whole slew of new forms of life that come into existence. And then as you go up and down the sedimentary column, you find that the first winged insects, the first dinosaurs, the first turtles, the first birds, the first marine reptiles, the first flowering plants, the first flowering plants come into the fossil record in an event that's now known as the Big Bloom, the biological Big Bloom. And then another striking event occurs in the Eocene period where you get the first mammals, where there are between 15 and 17 new orders of mammals that come suddenly into the fossil record, again, with no discernible connection to similar creatures in the lower strata beneath the Eocene.
Every single one of those claims is flat out wrong.
I can't remember if it was Meyer or somebody else who was trying to say that the sedimentary layers of the Grand Canyon proved the Great Flood, Noah's Flood, in the book of Genesis, chapter 6. Have you addressed that at all? Like, oh, look, the layers prove the flood?
So I don't know if he does that one. That's usually more of a young Earth creationist claim, because the thing
I think that may be Ken Ham. Maybe
it's
I'm thinking
Ken Ham or Ray Comfort or these guys. Because the thing is, the DI is trying to pose as scientifically rigorous as possible. And so to do that, they have more or less distance themselves from young Earth creationist claims. So I don't think that any of them overtly state that they're young Earth creationists. I think they're sort of accepting of geological time for the most part. So they wouldn't necessarily be the ones to do the whole, like, the flood made the Grand Canyon thing or anything. But
I enjoy
about that and other stuff,
a day was as if a million years, or a million years was as if a day. I mean, the goalposts ever moving kind of thing.
Yes.
I want to come back to the apologists with PhDs, et cetera. But first, I was just browsing your channel, doing my due diligence, and I saw that you had something about psychology. And I've been having these discussions recently about the Myers-Briggs personality test, which I actually had an employer give all of the employees back at one of the radio stations I worked at. And this is like a 90-plus question test, was developed 90 years ago. for the purposes of recruitment, being whether it's business or the military, et cetera. And it's supposed to divide people into like one of 14, 15, 16 personality types. And this is supposed to pigeonhole people into what they are. And as I understand, Dave, it's bullshit, right? Have you gotten into Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, I mean, from my limited understanding, the test is very limited because it fixates on binaries. And so you said, I mean, it's about 4 categories, and each is a binary. So 2 to the 4th, 16 categories based on these 4 categories. So, I mean, I don't think it's completely useless. I think everybody can identify introvert, extrovert, things like that. But like many other personality tests, yes, it is highly, highly limited, and I think not really taken seriously by psychologists in a rigorous way, at least.
You think we can, I mean, are there tests? Can you distill the complex person down using questionnaires, you think?
To an extent. I mean, I think this thing about the big 5, I forget exactly what it was. I covered it in one of the psych tutorials, which were written by a psychologist for me. Yeah, there are ones that are taken to be more credible than Myers-Briggs, but I don't think that any psychologist points to one specific test and says this is the be-all end-all determination of personality. That's, if it's even possible, it's still highly impractical to assess in that kind of a format.
Science denialism. I was talking to somebody recently about the fact that here in the 21st century, we have people who deny the existence of germs, or at least germ theory.
So this is a trend I've noticed, actually, because this is something that is being committed in astrophysics by charlatans in the realm of astrophysics, as well as biology. So this new trick of the charlatan is to go back in time in the history of science and find obsolete science from whether it's 50 years ago or 150 years ago or whatever, and then simply lift it and use it as though it's a viable current paradigm. Because the thing is that it comes prepackaged with buzzwords and talking points, so it makes their job really easy. So right now with biology, it's terrain theory. So if you go way back to like the time of Louis Pasteur, there was this discussion of, okay, we just figured out that pathogens exist. There's bacteria. And then later we found out that there's viruses. And then we had to figure out that they cause disease. And we figured this out a very long time ago. So any other competing idea of what pathogens do or don't do was discarded a very long time ago. So people who want to peddle science denial, they just go back in time. They take terrain theory. They use the terminology of the time and go, hey, this is a competing thing. No, it's not. It hasn't been for 200 years. So what are you talking about? We know what bacteria and viruses do. This is insane. The field of virology is a thing that exists. We study viruses. So it's not even just that some people deny that pathogens cause disease. Some people literally deny the existence of pathogens. They say viruses do not exist. It's bananas.
Don't you just want to get in the car and just drive over the cliff? I mean, you see this and you're like, I thought we were progressing, not regressing. It's not just the anti-vax stuff that we see and the hashtag
there's flat earthers.
Opposition. Flat Earth. What a great example. Like,
it's the dumbest thing any adult human can believe. I mean, it's mind-boggling that anyone.
Come on, let's get psychological. Why do you think people buy into it? Is it tribes?
Well, it's okay. I mean, if we're being completely honest, it is a combination of delusional narcissism and a severe cognitive deficit. So it's exclusively people that have zero capacity for critical thought, that also fantasize about being, I'm the Neo in the Matrix, I'm this one who knows the truth, and all these sheep are bought the lie. Because the thing is that it's not like anti-vax. Like the notion that, pharma put a thing in the vaccine, okay, it's wrong, but like, it doesn't violate the laws of physics to think that there could be something harmful in a vaccine. Whereas flat Earth is so easily debunkable by naked eye observations and logic a toddler could understand. So it's totally indefensible to engage in this. The only explanation is this idea of conspiracy and the government, and it's not even the government. It's every government all over the world, one huge cabal of lizard people that are controlling everything that has ever happened in history. To what? For what? For what purpose, right? It doesn't even achieve anything.
Well, the reason I was talking about tribes, and it's probably the foremost on my mind because I'm working on a presentation about this sort of group psychology, social identity, where these people can get together and they hold groups and meetings and conventions, and the fact that the rest of the world disagrees with them actually helps to validate them or make them feel validated, right?
Yes.
The more we're persecuted for our truth, the more we know we must be onto something. And then they're around all of these other validating personalities, and they come together and becomes really an evolved example of social cohesion, tribes.
Yes. And then furthermore, they establish these little communities, and then they vie for supremacy within the community. So they have little conferences, and then the different flat earthers are all wanting to be the one that talk at the thing. Honestly, it's true of any conspiracy theory. We're talking about anti-vax, we're talking about anything, QAnon, all of these things. What you've said is completely accurate and applies to all of them. And this is unfortunately the downside of the internet. Right now that we are in the information age, we have the democratization of information, and so you can no longer suppress information. You can't hide the fact that a government is butchering its people in some corner of the world because people are going to get on Twitter and expose it. But also, these people who made this ridiculous community were not able to find each other prior to the internet. So this is the downside of the information age, and unfortunately is proving to be an unbelievable problem, an enormous problem.
Talking here with science educator Dave Farina of the channel Professor Dave Explains. Okay, I'm hearing this a lot, and it makes me crazy. We need to make sure both sides of the issue are presented. And this can be about germ theory, flat earth, round earth, COVID, whatever. And it drives me crazy because, first of all, it distills it down again that there must be an A or B answer, right? It's a binary way of looking. And two, I feel like it's giving credibility to people who show up with the wackiest bullshit on the planet, and we're supposed to give them equal time. Do you address the idea like we must teach the controversy kind of thing? What's your approach?
I mean, my approach is to call it out where I see it. So I have a zero tolerance policy for this kind of stuff. Where I see pseudoscience, I call it out. I call it for what it is. So no, I absolutely do not think 2 + 2 is 4. There's no other. We're not entertaining the idea that it equals 5 or 3 or square or whatever, anything else.
I mean, what would you do with those people, though? I mean, if they show up and demand an equal seat at the table, are we supposed to just like laugh them out of the room, or what's the move? Depending on
what room you mean specifically. I mean, I just make content on the internet that exposes all of these lies. If we're talking about like a conference or something, then let's say we're talking about a particular field of science, then the experts in that field determine who's invited to that conference. And so there's no flat earthers that are invited to the astrophysics conference. So there's no danger of them. I mean, unless they barge in and then everyone just points and laughs at them and they get dragged away by security. But unfortunately, on the internet, on Twitter and things like that, everybody has a right to have a profile and say what they want. And this is one of the main ways that this misinformation is spreading. And so on those platforms where everyone does have a say, which, from a certain perspective, they ought to, I just like to expose and humiliate and berate them relentlessly. There are many other strategies. I encourage other people to take more nuanced approach to it, but I'm just not that guy. If you're going to talk about flat earth, or if you're going to spread lies, like yesterday, this woman that keeps popping up in my feed said something about, injecting hydrogen peroxide is a great therapy. It's like, you're going to get people killed. And I used very strong language and like, this woman is a monster. Report this tweet, get this profile banned from Twitter. Like, this is, when you're putting people's lives in jeopardy, we're not going to do I see what you're saying. No. This is ridiculous. You're wrong. You have no clue what you're talking about. This is dangerous. You deserve to be booted from the platform.
It's like whack-a-mole, though. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important.
Yeah.
But, you cut off one head and, man, 10 more appear, yes, especially these days, right?
Yeah, it does feel very disheartening, and it does feel futile at times. And so I'm definitely not sitting here going like, oh, I know exactly what to do. Everybody follow me. I'm just sort of doing what's available to me given the tools that I have. But that's why part of my outreach is to go to universities and talk to science students and say, hey, are you perhaps not so thrilled about the prospect of a career either working in the lab or teaching at a university? Here's this third option, science communication. We need you. We need young scientific minds who are passionate about storytelling or content creation or public outreach or whatever it is. We need you. We need an army here, right? We need a lot of people working on this problem, exclusively figuring out how to get the public to understand science.
That is a problem in technical fields. I was talking to Cara Santa Maria about it, to have such a great thing to communicate, but we don't have a lot of, we have more, but we don't have nearly enough communicators, right, to tell the story of science.
Yes.
Do you agree?
I would agree, because this concept of a career science communicator, which is what I am, is still relatively recent, right? It used to be like everybody thinks to Carl Sagan, sort of the godfather of SciComm, and he was an astronomer. He was a prominent astronomer, and then he pivoted to public outreach. And then, same with Neil Tyson and a lot of these people. And there still are a lot of people in the scientific and medical communities that take some of their time to communicate their science, which is very laudable. And I applaud them and I appreciate them because they're experts in their field. However, they're very busy. They do science. They are doctors. They are all these other things. This is what I do. This is what I do. I look at what the public is saying, what they're thinking. I try to figure out where they're going wrong, where I can correct it. This is all I am thinking about. And we need thousands more people doing exactly this.
Okay, Dave, tell me about this guy. Just because I've been watching, I have a spot in the cheap seats, and I've been watching the scrap going on between you and is it Dr. James Tour, Tour? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, just like the normal word. Yeah.
Who is Dr. James Tour, and what the hell is going on?
So he is a chemist at Rice University, and he's also a creationist and apologist who lies about origin of life research. So earlier we were talking about the Discovery Institute. So most of the Christian nationalist anti-science propaganda in the biological sciences is directed at evolution. So they all are trying to deny evolution, and they want intelligent design in the public school science classes, etc. But James is the only one that has tackled origin of life research. So not the evolution of life, but its origin, how the first living cell came about. And he's able to do this. He's the only one amongst them who's able to do this because he is a chemist. He is a working, publishing chemist. So he has a command of the chemistry vernacular, and he's able to fool people into thinking that he knows what he's talking about, even though he does not work in this anything remotely related to this field. He does material science. So he makes graphene and nanocars and things like that, which has absolutely nothing to do with origin of life research. He does not understand the field, and he grossly misrepresents it, slanders researchers in the field, and basically tries to paint the entire field of thousands and thousands of researchers as totally invalid top to bottom, a complete scam. Pretends to be neutral about it, but obviously as a creationist, he believes that God created life. He's ideologically opposed to the idea of abiogenesis, or life arising from natural processes. And so he has been sort of handpicked by Discovery Institute to be the wing of the DI single-handedly that attacks origin of life research. And he's been doing this for years. I caught wind of it and started making content debunking him. It went back and forth and escalated to the point where this clamor for debate arose. And so we did finally do that a couple weeks ago at Rice University.
My opponent's favorite origin of life expert, Professor Lee Cronin, now writes and says on multiple occasions that, quote, origin of life research is a scam, unquote, and, quote, there are lots of layers to the scam, unquote. A scam means a dishonest scheme or a fraud. It's beautiful. It's as if Professor Lee Cronin has been scientifically born again.
Of course, the idea that an origin of life researcher would be admitting that his entire body of work is fraudulent is totally idiotic, and any rational viewer can surmise that this tweet is a joke with zero further context. Still, one can find this further context by Googling for 10 seconds. Here is Lee explaining to podcaster Lex Fridman what he meant.
Origin of life research is a scam. So if this is Shakespeare, can we analyze this word? Why is the origin of life research a scam? Aren't you kind of doing origin of life research?
Okay, it was tongue in cheek, but yeah, I think, and I meant it as tongue in cheek. I'm not doing the origin of life research. I'm trying to make artificial life. And I also want to bound the likelihood of the origin of life on Earth, but more importantly, to find origin of life elsewhere. But let me directly address the tweet. There are many, many good chemists out there doing origin of life research, but I want to nudge them. And I think they're brilliant. There's no question. The chemistry they are doing, their motivation is great. So what I meant by that tweet is saying that maybe they're making assumptions about saying if only I could make this particular type of molecule, say this RNA molecule or this phosphodiester or this other molecule, it's going to somehow unlock the origin of life. And I think that origin of life has been looking at this for a very long time. And whilst I think it's brilliant to work out how you can get to those molecules, I think that chemistry and chemists doing origin of life could be nudged into doing something even more profound.
Big surprise. For the full conversation, visit the interview link below. Lee is saying that the creation of artificial life is more interesting to him than getting a precise historical model of how life arose on Earth. As you can see, James really shows his true colors immediately with this stunt. He is freely admitting that he has zero interest in truth, zero interest in a good faith conversation, and that it's all one big fat act.
It was really almost juvenile. Dave Farina gets owned in this clip. Boom. And then you come in and you're like, how freaking dishonest can you be? Am I reading that right? I mean, I was browsing pretty quickly, but.
So the debate was very chaotic, but ultimately he ended up humiliating himself more than anything I said to him, because he was just acting like in a very juvenile way. He was just shouting and shrieking over me.
This man has said multiple times that I have called him stupid. I have never called him stupid because I don't think he's stupid. I have said he's clueless on this topic. I have said he cannot read the scientific literature. That doesn't mean stupid. This man has become a musician, and then he went out, and in 2015, he started an educational site, which is huge. Stupid people can't do that. I admire him. This is an educational site, and I have never called him stupid because he's not stupid. He's not stupid. So I admire him for his educational site. And from what I understand, I'm not a musician. From what I understand, what people have said, he's an excellent musician. I admire him for that as well. His wife is here. He's a father. He has 2 children. I admire that a man can have a wife and 2 children and stay married and do these things these days. That is wonderful. That is wonderful.
So basically, James is shocked that my wife hasn't left me yet. And wow, Dave can play music. Wasn't this supposed to be about the science?
I never said Dave was stupid. I just said his content is a manure dump. I just said everything he says is wrong. I said he's clueless. I said he doesn't know chemistry. Although, again, who's used my content to pass his class? Anybody here? That's what I thought, James. He doesn't know chemistry, yet I'm helping your students. Isn't that interesting?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is how easy it is to get James to unravel. He refuses to admit that he was completely out of line in repeatedly proclaiming to his viewers that I don't understand chemistry, despite the fact that he is now pretending to praise me on my chemistry tutorials, which his students use to pass his class. So I explain chemistry better than he does, yet somehow I still don't know chemistry? The hypocrisy is off the charts. He is absolutely incapable of admitting that he was way out of line with all of the accusations he made in his content. Instead, he triples down with the same old crap.
Would you like to retract any of these statements?
That
or perhaps all of them?
On origin of life? No. Does Farina know chemistry? No.
I don't know chemistry.
You have
I don't know chemistry.
Anybody can read a script. You saw it tonight. The man could not speak without a script. He has people write it. You could do it. You could do it.
So it's been an incredible damage control campaign from Discovery Institute. After that debate, they just started posting blog post after blog post, dozens of them, dumb Farina, he's no match for the brilliant Tor and all these things. And then that's what you're seeing from his flock as well. They'll try to figure out ways to edit together little things to go, haha, Tor want, but it's like any neutral party that actually watched this debate from front to back is like, who is this guy and why is he screaming at the top of his lungs and what is he talking about?
I'll play devil's advocate. How do you know he's lying and he doesn't genuinely believe because he's brainwashed, like many other believers who might practice science?
So let's be clear. He believes that God created life because of Scripture, and that's totally fine. But when we're talking about the minutia, when he says all of the biology textbooks say this thing, and it's some dumb thing that he made up. And I go, no, they don't. Here's all the books that you just listed. This is what they actually say. They don't say that thing you said. Can you respond? And then he just fumbles. You said that origin of life research is a boutique field with only a dozen people working on it. That's a lie. Here's a list of hundreds of people working in the field. Why did you tell that lie? So very specific lies, comparing direct quotes to reality and forcing him to respond. I mean, without a doubt, proved that he is a liar on this topic with very, very specific claims that he's made. But it's true. I do ultimately believe he's not a Kent Hovind. He's not a used car salesman. He does genuinely believe ideologically what he says he believes. But then that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. He's a scientist that is denying science because he puts faith above science.
Dave Farina, do you spend any time on Hovind? Well, even when I was a believer, I didn't know who he was. Yeah, I just didn't know. I didn't care. He wasn't on my radar. And I kind of got the vibe that the only reason people may know his name now is because of atheist activists who are always throwing shit at him and saying, hey, this is crazy, and I mean, throwing a spotlight on him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Is there merit in going after the Hovinds, et cetera?
Well, I mean, I would want to push back on the idea that people didn't know him. He was very, very influential. A lot of people.
No. I'm just saying I didn't. Forgive
sure.
Me.
Yeah. I mean, he was very, very influential, and he was going to all the schools, and he had his video series, and he would send that out and everything. And so, yeah, a lot. I think that it's been very effective in everybody kind of dogpiling to expose him. And then documentaries came out that he, is abusive to women, and then he was harboring a pedophile and all these things. And so that culminated in him. I think all of that spotlight is what culminated on him losing his YouTube channel. So he doesn't have access to the platform anymore. And that's an incredible victory that he doesn't have access to the tool that he was using to proselytize. I mean, it's big.
But if I draw that line of demarcation between, 20 years ago, like pre-prison term when he was Dr. Dino and they had him in an auditorium speaking to, hundreds of young children. I get that.
Yeah.
But now I feel like he's just sort of holed up in the basement with a webcam. And I mean, I'll call him irrelevant. I mean, am I wrong on that?
Well, he's certainly irrelevant. In particular, now that he doesn't have access to YouTube anymore. And in fact, nobody talks about him or cares about him anymore. But he used to be publishing content very, very consistently. And, in my mind, anyone who is influential with their lies should be dealt with.
Am I part of the problem? I just brought him up. So now am I actually an example of the type of thing that I was saying someone else? This is a deep one. Like I'm literally in a feedback loop on a hamster wheel.
Right,
it's going to keep me up tonight. Sorry, Dave.
It's a set of mirrors, yeah. So here's the thing. Obviously, a lot of people cite that, and I think that it can be damaging to bring attention to someone if you don't also adequately expose them. If you adequately expose them, in doing so, it's a net positive because you're calling attention to the fraudulence of somebody and demonstrating that fraudulence very, very effectively and thoroughly. So as long as you do that, it's good.
I'll add a layer to that onion that if they are making an argument that is common elsewhere, then debunking it in one context relates to the other context. That would be fair.
Yeah, and inevitably the script is very similar for all of those, especially the young Earth creationist types. They just all go to Answers in Genesis and pull it off of the thing. And
it just boggles my mind. They think the Earth is younger than the Sumerian civilization. And I just think, how do we get there? What's going on?
There are trees older. There are living trees that are older than how old they say the Earth is. That's why the current incarnation of the Christian propaganda in the biological sciences is very dangerous, because they're trying to present themselves as more credible scientifically. That's why they are distancing themselves from young Earth creationism. They're accepting of geological time, but that lends them the credence to then lie profusely about all of these other aspects of science. So it has to get dealt with.
I was talking to a buddy of mine, Dave Fitzgerald, and said if you needed proof of evolution, just look at the creation story or Christianity, right? Because many of them have gone from, literal 6 days, 6,000 years ago, to the days were millions of years, to it's an old Earth, but it's still true, to some of its metaphor and it means something else. And so we're seeing all of this, it's like silly putty. They just mold it into whatever it needs to be to try to stay relevant as more and more people become evolutionarily literate. I don't know.
If they're rational. If they're rational, those are the rational ones. The irrational ones simply deny all of that to one degree or another.
Okay, for a second, let's pinball back to abiogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the arguments for God that I'm glad you're here, because I want to hear what you have to say. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. Where did the first cell come from? Abiogenesis, all these things tying in together as proof that there must have been a creator for that first cell. Where did life come from? How do you address these types of questions?
Well, so I mean, it's a straw man to bring up matter being created. Certainly, the matter that comprised the first living organism wasn't created ab initio, right? I mean, if you want to go all the way back to early cosmology, we understand how stars form and how atomic nuclei are fused in stars, and then they're spread out, and then a planetary system forms, and then planetary formation. So none of that has to do specifically with biology, but that is all to say that the very small molecules that were the starting place for the assembly of the first life, they're a given. They're everywhere. They come to us they are made in space, and they come to, they land on the Earth on asteroids from space, and then they're also synthesized here. So we're starting from small molecules, and then those make the building blocks, which then polymerize to make the long chains. And then there's this field of chemistry called systems chemistry that talks about how these sets of molecules can evolve by honestly Darwinian principles over time to yield the first protocell. So this is incredibly esoteric and incredibly complicated, and it's almost pointless for me to try to describe it in any more detail right now. But it's a vibrant field with thousands of people working on it, all these different steps, and we've made an incredible amount of progress over the past 70 or 80 years.
But if someone says the first cell came from somewhere, I mean, that's a loaded statement, obviously, because many of them are coming from a religious background. But your response would be what? The first cell.
The first cell coming from somewhere, meaning God made it, or meaning it came from space, like panspermia?
I mean, they're going to attach agency in the form of a designer, a deity, a first causer kind of thing,
My response is you're free to believe that, but there is absolutely, to pretend that that's a scientific belief is absurd, especially in the light of the progress that the field has made over the past decades. But it's just, this is the God of the gaps. And so James Tour is going to push back against this and say, I don't believe in the God of the gaps. No, you have a gap in your knowledge that you fill with God. That's the God of the gaps. And this gap used to be wider. We used to say, what's volcanoes? Oh, it's a God doing this thing. What's lightning? Zeus is going like that. What's disease? Oh, the gods send the demons and they do the thing. So it used to be God is everything, and then the gaps got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the only two places there's even a remote gap is the origin of life and the origin of the universe. And honestly, the one for the origin of life is kind of no room for him anymore.
I just love watching the apologists because they always start with the deistic, right? This real nebulous, faceless other that began it all, right? The watchmaker. And then they take this chasm-sized leap into their specific deity with a proper name, right?
Yeah.
Who lived at certain times and did certain specific things. And I'm like, well, and then I never am really able to see how they connected those dots except for its faith.
Scripture.
Right?
Yeah, sure. That's the faith. And in fact, it is a very important distinction to make because, of course, the DI is trying to paint me as this ultra militant, angry atheist, which is simply not the case. I am an atheist, but I don't make content on atheism and I don't really much care. And I would never attack a deist who chooses to maintain that God of the gaps in the creation of the universe. If you believe that a God made the universe, I don't care. I'm not even going to try to argue with you. It doesn't matter to me. But in terms of it's just, you're absolutely right that they will take that concept and then try to make the leap to the God of their faith without realizing that they're just imposing so much on it. But then second of all, denying science. Where they're trying to put their God. So the problem is that people are not aware of origin of life research. They don't even know it's a thing that exists. And so they're just rejecting an entire field because it's inconvenient to them.
Do you think we are born with an evolved predisposition to look up and try to find a cosmic father figure? Is there something evolutionarily wired in us?
I think that we are predisposed to seek answers, and where answers are not there, we will fill it in. And divinity has classically been the go-to answer. So that pre-scientifically, it was the only answer, and now we're able to actually answer questions in a logical, empirical way. And so I think that science has made atheism a defensible position, or at least more defensible. I think there was always some defense for it, but now it's much more viable to defend a position of atheism. So I don't know necessarily that we're hardwired to seek divinity. I just think that we seek answers. That and the fact that we're afraid to die. And
plus, I think as long as there is suffering in this world, there will people will construct a mechanism for coping. I mean, that's fair, right? I mean,
sure.
My body's broken now. One day I'll have a new body. I miss my great grandmother. One day we'll be reunited. I mean, we're meaning makers in that way.
I was poor in life, so I'll be rich in the afterlife.
If you could fix the classroom, I'm sure you have opinions about the format of education, maybe even especially here in the United States. What are we getting wrong? Like, if you could change the way we teach science, what would you do?
So I do get this question a lot, and it's always very difficult for me to answer because the problem is that I don't immediately see gaping problems. I myself received a very good public school education in the sciences included, which I took with me to college to then major in chemistry. And I did a master's in science education. So we looked pretty rigorously at the NGSS, the new science standards and everything. And so, like, to me, on the federal level, the rubric, the framework that's implemented, I don't see a major problem there. Of course, the issue then is funding, right? Education is dramatically underfunded and teachers are underpaid. And so that's where you get the gaps. That's where you have low-income areas where there's no good teachers. They don't have any resources. And so to me, it's just money. This is not my field, and I don't really know anything about policy, but in my naive mind, if I was president and I could issue executive orders, I would take a big old chunk out of defense, put it into education, pay teachers $90K a year, give them all the resources they need, stop making them buy stuff out of their own money to bring to school, things like that. And I feel that would be the difference. But I don't know. I don't know if it would or wouldn't.
Well, I think we all have subjective perspectives. You know, I worry sometimes we are training people to take tests, but we're not really igniting the fire. You know, we're not lighting the spark of curiosity in a lot of people. Yeah. It's, the awe and wonder, the Sagan-esque kind of stuff. Maybe I was being a bit romantic about the idea of teaching.
So it ultimately boils down to the individual teacher. Some teachers have that gift, some don't. But if the position was better paid, we'd be getting more talented teachers. Certainly, I felt that I received that. I took biology, chemistry, AP physics, and in particular in chemistry, I felt I enjoyed it. I was curious and I learned and I was able to apply knowledge, and that's what then in college I majored in chemistry and thought, this is great. This is really cool stuff,
Tell me about your channel. I mean, pitch it. Give me the brochure for those just now being introduced to you as we wrap up.
So the main goal of the challenge has the main goal of the channel has always been to offer curriculum aligned academic tutorials for as many academic subjects as possible, obviously mainly science, but just sort of spanning the gamut. So I want to teach you chemistry, biochemistry, biology, physics, math, astronomy, ecology, botany, geology, everything that I can at a very basic level. So usually like kind of freshman undergraduate, like 101 style learning. And so this is a place you can go if you're curious, if you want to learn something with a little bit more depth than some edutainment video, right? A little bit more. There's more meat there, but it's not something that is going to kill you. You're not going to be so completely lost. I mean, for some of my content, you would. There is prerequisite knowledge, but it's relatively easy to bite into and get a moderate understanding of the basics of a field of science.
I try to stay above a lot of that, but I just find myself watching this back and forth between you and the Discovery Institute, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's like watching Thunderdome.
I don't know why they keep doing it, because they will make their little posts character assassinating me. I'll reply mocking them because they're children, and then I end up ratioing them because their post will get 10 likes, and then my comment gets 70 likes, and then it's just dozens of people all making fun of them and how they're idiot liars, and it's just like, why do you guys even have a Twitter presence? Everyone here is dunking on you. What are you even doing here? Yeah. It's really funny to watch.
All right, the channel is called Professor Dave Explains, and I will link that and everything else in the description box. You're a great science communicator and a lot of fun to talk to. Thanks for indulging me. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.